Dawn crept over the frostbitten pasture with a pale, trembling light, the kind that softened everything it touched except the pain in Willow's left hind leg. The mare stood rigid in the cold, her breath rising in uneven clouds, her entire body telling the quiet truth before Elias could name it. He stepped out of the barn, coat unbuttoned, hair still damp from washing, and saw immediately that something was wrong. Willow didn't greet him with her usual nicker. She didn't shift her weight. She didn't even lift her head. She just stood there, frozen in place, as if trapped inside her own skin. Elias moved slowly toward her, careful not to startle her already trembling frame. He laid a hand against her shoulder, feeling heat pulse beneath her winter coat. The swelling above her hoof told the rest of the story. A deep abscess, one that had likely been building unseen for days. He exhaled a quiet curse into the morning air. These things could turn deadly fast. As he knelt to inspect the injury, a blackbird fluttered down from the fence line and landed a few feet away. It watched him with startling steadiness, head cocked, wings tucked tight against its sides. Elias spared it a tired glance. "Not much you can do for her," he murmured, though the bird didn't budge. It simply stood there, as if it had been waiting. Willow shifted, pain rippling through her entire body, and Elias felt a familiar ache bloom in his chest. The last time he'd felt this powerless, he'd been sitting beside a hospital bed, holding his wife's cold hand long after her breath had stopped. Willow had been the only thing that kept him standing afterward, her gentle presence a tether to the world. Seeing her like this now stirred a fear he hadn't expected to face again. He warmed water, mixed a poultice, and steadied his hands as he applied it, whispering soft encouragements into the quiet. Willow tried to trust him. He could feel it in the way her breathing hitched, steadied, then hitched again. Pain does strange things to a creature's hope. Elias kept working, jaw clenched in determination, until the tension beneath her skin shifted. The abscess was close to breaking, but not close enough. The blackbird hopped nearer, almost close enough to touch. Elias frowned. "Go on," he said gently. "Give us space." But the bird didn't. Instead, with a swift movement, it pecked once sharp, precise, at the swollen flesh. Willow jolted, stamped the injured leg, and a sudden burst of pressure ruptured through. Steam rose in the cold. Willow sagged with relief. Elias stared at the bird, breath caught in his throat. It fluttered back to its fence post, feathers settling as if the moment had required nothing from it at all. Willow pressed her muzzle weakly into Elias's chest, and he wrapped an arm around her neck, feeling her shudder as pain eased from her body. For the first time in weeks, something like hope stirred inside him. The worst had passed. He believed it. He needed to believe it. But as the sun lifted higher, the bird turned its head sharply toward the far fence line, feathers puffing alarm, as if it sensed something he couldn't yet see. Willow walked more steadily by midday, each careful step releasing a little of the morning's fear from Elias's chest. He followed her along the paddock, watching her test her weight with the tentative courage of an animal that knew pain too well. Relief settled over him like a warm coat. She had survived the worst of it. For now, at least, she was safe. The blackbird lingered on the fence rail, its small body rising and falling with the rhythm of the wind. Elias had never seen a bird stay this long. It felt less like coincidence and more like presence, though he tried to brush the thought aside. Willow needed rest, water, and gentle walking. She didn't need him spinning meaning out of the morning's strange luck. Still, every time he glanced up, the bird was there, silent, attentive, almost protective. He left the mare and her filly Ember inside the paddock while he went to fetch fresh hay. Ember was still young enough to prance rather than walk, her pale coat catching the light like brushed silver. Elias smiled despite the fatigue tugging at him. There was something reassuring about watching the filly's small leaps, as if she believed Willow would always be strong enough to catch her shadow. The wind shifted suddenly, sweeping through the ranch with a sharp, restless note. Elias stopped mid-step. The air had changed, gone still in a way that pressed on his ears. Even the dog near the porch paused, tail curling low as if sensing an invisible shift. The blackbird ruffled its feathers, wings half lifted in warning. Elias tightened his grip on the hay bale and quickened his pace back toward the paddock. He was a man prone to superstition, but something about the quiet made him uneasy. Willow stood close to Ember now, head turned toward the far fence line, ears pinned forward in alarm. Elias opened his mouth to call to her. Then a crack split the air. A section of the old fence gave way, collapsing inward with a violent shudder. Ember squealed, startled into a frantic leap straight into the falling wood. Elias dropped the hay and sprinted. His heart pounded, his boots tearing through the half-melted frost. The filly scrambled beneath the broken rail, trapped and kicking in blind fear. Willow circled her in panic, hooves striking against the earth as if trying to force the world back into place. "Easy, girl, easy," Elias shouted, voice breaking. He shoved the broken rail upward, muscles shaking with the effort. The wood resisted, heavy with moisture and rot. Ember's breath came in thin, terrified gasps. Willow pressed closer, her instinct to protect turning frantic, dangerous. With a final heave, Elias pulled the rail high enough to slide the filly free, but not before she let out a sound he'd never forget, a soft, collapsing cry, the sound of something small losing its hold on the world. Ember sagged into his arms, her legs folding beneath her. Willow's head lowered, muzzle brushing her foal with trembling insistence. Elias felt the truth the moment he lifted Ember's limp body. The relief of the morning dissolved into something darker, heavier. Willow nudged her filly, desperate for a response that wouldn't come, and from the fence rail above them, the blackbird let out one long, mournful note, as if announcing a loss the world wasn't ready to accept. Elias buried Ember beneath the lone cottonwood, where the pasture dipped in his shadow, the earth still half frozen and resistant beneath his shovel. Each strike into ground echoed through his bones, steady but hollow, as though grief itself was shaping the rhythm. Willow stood nearby, trembling, her breath fogging the air in uneven wisps. She nudged the edge of the blanket Elias had placed over the small, still body, her movements slow, searching. Elias swallowed hard. "She's at rest now," he whispered, though the words felt thin against the weight of the afternoon. The blackbird perched on the lowest branch, its feathers fluffed against the creeping cold. It watched the scene without movement, as if it too understood the finality settling over the ranch. Elias wished he could blame the broken fence or fate or something he could name and curse. But in truth, the world didn't owe explanations. It only offered moments, some tender, some merciless, and left him to carry them. He smoothed the last mound of earth and set Willow's worn halter at the grave's head as a marker. The gesture felt small, but small things were all he had to give. Willow let out a low, aching sound and lowered her head beside his shoulder. Her grief blended with his until he couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Light began to fade when footsteps approached on the gravel path. Elias didn't turn. The ranch rarely saw visitors. But the presence that joined him came quietly, without demand. Mara Callan, the neighboring rancher's daughter, stood a few feet away holding a thermos of coffee between her hands. Her coat was dusty, her face marked with the same kind of tiredness he felt in his bones. She studied the grave with soft, understanding eyes. "I saw the fence," she murmured. "Thought you might need someone here." Elias accepted the thermos, not because he needed the coffee, but because accepting it felt like an acknowledgement of something he hadn't had in a long time. Company. Mara moved beside him, keeping a respectful distance. They stood together in a silence that didn't press, didn't demand, just existed like a shared breath. Willow's legs trembled, and Mara reached for the mare's face, rubbing gently between her eyes. "She's holding on," Mara said quietly, "even if she doesn't understand how." Elias nodded. She tried to save her. She just didn't know how to stop it. Grief welled in his throat again, sharp as winter air. Mara didn't respond with platitudes or explanations. Instead, she knelt, gathering the loose earth around the grave, smoothing it with steady hands. Her movements were patient, almost ceremonial. Elias realized she was offering a kind of ritual, simple, honest, and exactly what the moment needed. The blackbird hopped down from the tree onto a nearby rock, tilting its head as if recognizing the shift in the air. Lantern light from the barn began to spill across the paddock, casting long, quiet shadows. Mara rose and touched Elias's sleeve, not lingering, just grounding. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said. For the first time since the fence had fallen, Elias felt a fragile thread of warmth stir within the cold. Willow leaned into him, breathing weakly, and Mara stayed beside them as dusk folded across the ranch like a gentler kind of sorrow, one that hinted faintly at the possibility of healing. Morning came softly, brushing pale gold across the paddock as though the night had tried to protect the ranch from further sorrow. Elias stepped out onto the porch, the air crisp enough to sting his lungs. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting the quiet hold him. Willow lingered near the barn, her stance weakened, but no longer trembling as violently as the night before. She looked smaller somehow, as if grief had hollowed out the space around her. Elias approached with slow, deliberate steps, murmuring her name like a prayer. She lifted her head, meeting his gaze with an exhausted gentleness that unraveled something inside him. Mara arrived not long after, a blanket draped over one arm and a small tin of oatmeal in the other. She didn't knock or call out. She simply joined in the pasture, as though she belonged there all along. "Eat something," she said, handing him the tin. "You'll need the strength." Her tone wasn't soft, but it carried a warmth he hadn't realized he craved. Elias obeyed, the food dull on his tongue, but grounding in a way grief rarely allowed. Together they guided Willow into the barn, where morning light filtered through the slats in bright, clean lines. Mara cleaned the stall while Elias checked Willow's leg, relieved to see the swelling easing. Willow nudged his arm, leaning into his touch with a trust that felt heavier today, almost reverent. He brushed her mane gently, whispering, "I'm here. We'll get through this." The blackbird appeared again, perching on the rafters above them. It seemed watchful, almost protective, its presence a quiet echo of the morning the abscess burst. Elias found strange comfort in its persistence. Some creatures stayed only long enough to witness a moment. Others lingered to shepherd what came after. A sound of tires crunching over gravel startled Willow, and Elias turned to see an older neighbor's truck pulling up. Clara Wynne stepped out, a retired rancher holding a rope loosely in hand. Behind her walked a chestnut mare, thin, wary, and limping. "Found her near the highway," Clara said. "Looks like she needs someplace safe." Her eyes settled on Elias, softening with unspoken understanding. "Thought maybe you'd know what to do." Elias felt the weight of the offer settle into him. Another broken creature. Another chance to choose compassion, despite the ache still fresh in his chest. Mara rested a hand on his shoulder, steadying him without words. He exhaled slowly, the decision rising in him like a tide. "Bring her in," he said. "She can stay." Clara nodded and led the frightened mare toward the barn. Willow lifted her head, watching the newcomer with quiet curiosity rather than fear. Mara helped Elias spread fresh bedding, their movements instinctively coordinated. Grief did not vanish, but it shifted, making room for something gentler, a willingness to keep caring even when care had cost him so much. When the chestnut mare stepped into the stall, the blackbird fluttered down to the entrance as though offering a silent blessing. Elias stood between Willow and the newcomer, feeling the fragile beginnings of something like renewal take root. Mara moved beside him, her hand brushing his lightly, a touch that didn't demand anything but still meant everything. Elias looked at the two Maras, at the soft morning light spilling across the straw, at the bird perched above them like a small, steadfast guardian. Loss had carved at hollow places, but kindness, Mara's, Willow's, even the birds, began filling them with a warmth he hadn't expected to feel again. He drew a steady breath, the words forming quietly in his mind more than his mouth. "We keep going, and we don't do it alone.